Hey everybody, how's it going? Dan Shinder here on Yesshift with... Steven Shinder. Oh, I can't hear you, Steve. What's up with that? Let me turn down the Jon Vangelis, see if we can hear Steve. Go ahead, Steve.
All right, is that better?
Yeah, there we go. There's Steve.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so I'm Steven Shinder, and we have our returning guest who was on our Yes in the 1980s episode. It's Dave Watkinson. How are you doing, Dave?
Hi, good. Yeah, very good. Nice to be with you again.
Back for a second hazing coming to us near the Gatwick Airport. It's really an honor to have you on, Dave, to talk about the recently passed away Vangelis, who you happen to be very familiar with, not just his music, but him personally. You spent some time with him and Jon. I'll leave it to you guys. Steve, where do you want to start?
Right. So, yeah, sorry, I was just checking the sound. We sound good.
Yeah.
So Vangelis, born March 29th, 1943, died in Paris on May 17th this year due to heart failure, apparently. And I figured, we'd start out by going around and saying how we first became aware of Vangelis and his music. So why don't we start with Dave, since I think you probably got familiar with him earlier than either of us, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I first got introduced to him through the BBC TV program in this country, which was Cosmos and Carl Sagan. So the American astrophysicist has this absolutely marvelous and inspiring TV series in the 1970s.
Yeah, my mother was in love with him, by the way. She loved the show and just thought he was great. So I kind of grew up on Carl Sagan.
He was a very, very interesting man, really quite different. And at that time in this era, we had a space program called, with a very old guy on it. And we've been there for about 40 years. It's the longest running TV program in the world, stars Sky at Night. And so the music that he put around the series was an introduction to all the electronic greats. So it wasn't just Vangelis, but he had a whole bunch of late 70s music. So, you would have had Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, and Jean-Michel Jarre. You would have all snippets of all this material. And so my introduction was the theme tune, which came out on Singer. So I've had this since '75 on BBC Records.
Wow, that's awesome.
So BBC Records, and it's the single, and that's early days for Vangelis, really, to have a very minor hit, but it certainly picked up the ears, and that was an introduction to this crazy world, because around 75, 76, that's when everything happened for me for music. Yes, Vangelis, and there's nothing sounds like Vangelis, really.
Right.
Even in the pantheon of those greats like Tangerine Dream, who I love, and some of the others. So that's how it came to most people in the UK, through that way.
Interesting. Steve, how about you? When did you find out about him?
So Vangelis has these themes that are very ingrained in pop culture, specifically the Chariots of Fire theme, the dun 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 dun. And so that was pretty much always there. Heck, it was even in the movie Good Burger, which I watched as a little kid in the late 90s. But I wasn't really aware of Vangelis himself until I want to say 2007 or 2008. I remember it was around the time Jon Anderson was advertising this box set that people could order called the Lost Tapes box set. And I went online to listen to samples from one of the discs. One of them was from a Mother's Day concert that Jon played in 1996. And one of the tracks that was on there was I'll Find My Way Home. And even though it was Jon and his band, like, you know, Vangelis wasn't at that concert, it was still like the music and the lyrics. It was like, oh, wow, there's really something to this, isn't there? And I think One More Time was a sample on there as well. And through that and like through researching more of Jon's solo discography and collaborations, I found out more about Jon and Vangelis. And I think the first thing from them that I listened to was their, you know, the original version of I'll Find My Way Home. And there's that music video that's really nice. People can find on YouTube where they're like in this venue and it's like glowing. And
yeah,
like, even if it's like being mimed or whatever, like I'm not really sure, it still looks really magical, you know, and it transports you to like a heavenly place. And then in late 2008, I decided to check out Vangelis's solo work. I remember listening to Heaven and Hell very vividly. Like, even though I haven't listened to it that many times, like maybe just a couple times, the opening themes where it's like, like it's so vivid, like, oh, and I listened to it again, like to refresh for this, but it's amazing how after all those years, like that theme was like still so vivid. And of course, the track that I kept revisiting from that album over the years was the one that he did with Jon Anderson called So Long Ago, So Clear. And it's just so beautiful, and it's a favorite of mine.
Same here. I first came across him, I must have been 12 or 13, because I came across him within a year of that album coming out that he and Jon did. And a friend of mine who was a fellow Yes fan and my age, we were like 12 or 13. And he asked me, have you ever heard of Vangelis? And I said, no. And I think at the time we were pronouncing it Vangelis. We were kids and didn't speak
it's
Greek.
Understandable. Yeah.
We didn't speak Greek. And he played it for me, and it was like, wow, this is great. And of course, I love Chariots of Fire. But that was my first exposure to him way back then. And he had such a long, not only did he have such a long, thriving career, which is always impressive, but music that he did way back then has held up through all these decades. You know, he never did something, in my opinion, that didn't like go out of style or anything like that and had to reinvent himself, which is great when people need to do that and they're able to. But I don't think he ever kind of needed to go through that sort of pivot any more than John Williams. If you want John Williams music, you hire John Williams, because this is what John Williams does. And I think Vangelis is right on par with that.
Right. I think Vangelis, like, upon brushing up for this, I realized that very early on, you know, I'm not as familiar with the band he was in, Aphrodite's Child, but re-listening to one of his early albums called Earth, it feels very much like the little bit I've heard of Aphrodite's Child, which makes sense because a couple of band members are on there. And so the opening track, Come On, feels like very more rocky, but then as the album progresses, it feels more worldly, like it's got stuff that sounds like it's from different parts of the world. There's even a song on there called Ritual, funny enough. And his album before that, which I dare not mispronounce, but it's about the like these student protests, and it's like it's kind of avant-garde, like it even includes like what sound like news bites and stuff. So I think he has varied a bit, but for the most part, when I think of Vangelis's solo or film stuff, I think of, you know, all the synthy and very spacey sounding stuff.
Yeah. You know, before we go back to Dave, I want to mention something that I'd love to get your thoughts on, Dave, because we know, you know, we're all very much yes men, yes fans, been part of the soundtrack of our lives. And This one comment from Vangelis, for those of you who don't know how involved he almost became with Yes, and not just the album with Jon Anderson, commenting in August of 1974 about his short episode with Yes, Vangelis said, "I know all the records of Yes, and we don't exactly have the same perception. We go in two different directions. If we have to be together, then there is a problem. I can say that Yes music is very interesting. In every record that they do, there are some parts I like, some parts that I don't. I think Tales from Topographic Oceans is more of a head work. I prefer heart work." Summarizing the chance of his joining Yes, he says, "It's difficult. It's a problem. Maybe we're going to do things together. Maybe I'm going to make my solo album with Jon. This is more sure, but about Yes, I can't say." That's a really interesting quote that encapsulates an exact moment of time between, some things. Dave, what are your thoughts on that? And can you even imagine a version of Yes with Vangelis, especially being that there's a Yes version with the one-time, Patrick Moraz? Yeah.
So I've been digging through my hundreds of cuttings of the 70s, which cover all of this. Would I have loved it? I would have absolutely loved it. And I'm sure Steve Howe presumably got some tapes of that
I would hope so.
because it's all been kept. And I guess it would have been against his wishes for anything to come out. And it might only be some doodles, but he's just way too big for Yes, wasn't he?
Yeah.
As a musician, he is the band. He's all of them.
It'd be hard for him.
He started off as an organ player, but eventually, not too big a step, 5 years, he became all of it. And so, and he has some famous quotes, doesn't he, about normal bands and musicians.
Yeah.
Which is quite funny.
I see it odd him fitting into the band environment and structure and
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if he did, he wouldn't tour. And he wouldn't want to play the same thing every night. And Jon Anderson would definitely want it played exactly the same because it'd be on the album. And we need to hear the album as Yes fans, just as the album. So it would have never worked. However, who would like to listen to 5 minutes of the band playing with him playing keyboards, and it's got to be on a tape somewhere, hasn't it?
I would think so and hope so. And interesting,
I would love to listen to that.
Yeah.
I wonder what they ran through.
Not all with that, but later Eddie Jobson as well.
Yeah.
But back to Vangelis, yeah.
Yeah, but I wonder what they would have run through to, like, would they have just jammed? Would they have played to anything of his?
Would they have played Roundabout?
Yeah, let's do the organ solo of Roundabout. Like, I wonder, and it'd be so interesting to hear that. But here's what's interesting. Given what you said about his sensibilities and his lack of sensibilities that would make him not a fit for any band, it's kind of odd that it even came up at all. Don't you think? I mean, don't you think that it's odd that it was a consideration, being that he wouldn't have toured, he wouldn't have played the same thing. He's not, like, how did it even come about?
So where was Vangelis' head when Jon said, "Hey, what about you come and join in Yes?" And he went, "Well, I'm not doing much. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't." But you wouldn't have thought that would have ever happened.
And maybe it was a big, like, awakening, like, what the hell am I thinking?
Maybe they were, he was in Hampton Gurney Studios, Hampton Gurney Street, which is where I went. So they would have been in London. So, they could have just been in London and said, "Come over, check out the band. There's a keyboard setup that I don't know because he's got so many." Yeah. It is an odd one. We've never heard the actual ins and outs of that. Yeah. Quite clearly, it was never going to work, but it's one of those little bits in Yes history where we'd like a little snippet, wouldn't we? 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, do you think there's 5 Yes albums with Vangelis in a parallel universe?
Paralleler heights.
Are we not in a parallel universe already? I'm not sure what,
Yeah. And maybe in the parallel universe, they or we are saying, wow, remember that time you almost didn't join?
Listen, I think on the basis now, maybe give it a couple of years, then obviously Vangelis has done hundreds and hundreds of things that he never wanted to actually release or come out or any other. And of course, who knows what box set will come out in the future within 2 years and what snippets people can dig out,
That's a great point.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, a box set of his work that might have one or two of these run-throughs when he would drop by the studio for tea and a jam. Who knows?
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we would want.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how long it is. It just means, wow, it did happen. Okay, sounded okay to me. And all right, there you go. We got sort of a little box ticked. But it's a strange one why it ever happened. But he was way too big for Yes, wasn't he? Yeah. He was just like the whole band.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, we talked before we went live, we were talking about instruments and things. And I'd be interested to hear it, even to hear what instruments what keyboards did he play? Was it just an organ? Was it some very known synth, like a Mini Moog, Polymoog? Was it something totally off the wall, like Patrick brought to the table?
Well, do you know what I was thinking when I was listening to some of the stuff earlier? Instead of the grandeur and big stuff, think about that time. So it would have been, it's around that time, isn't it?
Right.
And it's a 75, 76, and kind of around this time. But if you look a little bit into some of his other records, he's just doing like Rhodes piano, right? So what I'm thinking is, what if he just came along with the piano and Rhodes, electric or small organ, and what if it was just a
time in a word or something like that?
Maybe it was, hey, we're just playing To Be Over or something, just join in. Let's see how.
So here's a question for both of you. How much of an influence, so we don't know what the experience is that the Yes members actually had with him, but let's presume they at least jammed and talked about music and they listened to his music. Let's just assume that for a moment for this question. How much of an influence do you think him crossing paths with them had an influence on them choosing Patrick, number one? And number two, do you think him being exposed to them at all had any influence whatsoever on what he did next that you just showed us?
Well, I think the huge influence is already there for Jon because he was listening. He was listening early 70s, 73, 72. He was listening to early 70s Vangelis. He was already in love with the guy, musically,
right?
And astounded by him, and that's why, they used it in the Yes opening music for concerts in '76. So he has that link. Vangelis is playing in the background before the Yes gig,
right?
So he's already saying he loves it. That's why he's gone more electrical. That's why Relay became that, because of those electronic influences. A few years earlier, he was collecting it. I wrote about that in the Jon Anderson book. The history of the opening music.
Right.
So Jon mentioned it. There's interviews there. His collection. So he was completely in that electronic world. Vangelis is with the top, and
What do you think, Steve?
He wanted. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Steve, do you think that he had any influence on how Patrick ended up, or why they chose him, or why Patrick was a fit for this weird sort of temporary pivot into a bit of jazz fusion influence on them and the different sounds?
Well, it was definitely easier to go with Patrick because he wasn't as big of a name, I guess, or at least Patrick didn't see himself as I can just go off in my own direction,
right? But I mean,
at that time. But.
I mean, influence on them choosing Patrick over maybe someone else they were looking at or looking for,
right?
Because of any sort of musical bridge between the two, in a way.
Well, to be fair, at the time, none of them were really big.
Right.
Vangelis wasn't very big at the time, and Refugee wouldn't have been big news. But if Vangelis came in and played some Rhodes and electric piano and some piano, and he's a big man, foreign country, big man, and it didn't work. And then, hey, Patrick, he looks very similar to Vangelis. He's playing electric keyboards, and they're similar. They're very similar, aren't they?
He actually had a
Rhodes.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're quite similar.
Yeah. And
maybe it did influence. Getting Patrick.
Yeah, maybe there was an influence. I'm not really sure, but in terms of like influencing Jon, like Dave said earlier, like people have, way back when I remember reading up that like some people were like wondering if Vangelis performed on Elias of Sunhillow because bits of it sound somewhat similar to what Vangelis does, but of course he's not on that. So there's at least an influence, even though he's not there on that album.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because he would have been listening to Vangelis for 3 or 4 years by then.
Right, exactly. Interesting. Dave, talk a little bit more about the time you spent with him.
In the 1980s, I was involved with the Yes fan magazine times. So way before the internet. There was a time before the internet, and
you didn't know, Steve.
Wait, there was?
Stephen, there really was. We used stick some pieces of paper together because it got to a certain point, maybe 79, 80, where the music papers weren't interested in Yes, and so you couldn't find the information anywhere unless you were a fan, and then you decided to put fanzines together. So I used to help out, either write for those, do interview, or do a crossword, send some pictures in. And it became at that time where we got reasonably friendly, me and a few other people, with John Martin, who was Jon Anderson's personal assistant. And on one of those occasions, I think I asked could we have an interview, or I do something. It's quite a long time ago now, but do something. And he said, yeah. So I think I went to his offices in London to maybe have a chat about being an assistant with Jon Anderson, anything to put in the magazine that would be different. And when we were there in London office, and he said, well, I've got to go in somewhere in a minute, and do you want to come? And I went, yeah, okay. Because I was only 20, so I don't know, 20. I went, yeah, I'll go anywhere, really. Yeah, I'll go. And so we ended up going down the street, because all the streets are pretty close in London. It's a quarter of a mile from Wardour Street to, Vangelis' place. So we were walking there. I said, yeah, I need to go and see Vangelis. So I went, okay, I'll go. So we ended up going in this street where it looks like nothing. It's still there. If you look it up on the internet, it still looks like nothing. But then you went up right to the top floor. And of course, from a nothing building and street, the door of a studio looked like nothing, but you opened it up. And it's incredible, maybe like the pictures you've seen, but it's a cross between an art gallery, a music keyboard shop, a drum shop, and a beautiful mansion. And it's all on the top floor. So I walked in there, like stunned that we were actually going into Vangelis' studio. We walked in and he said, hi, Vangelis was in there. He's on the left-hand side. We were on the keyboards. He introduced me, said, hello, Dave from the magazine, or which one? About 5 different magazines in those days. I can't remember which one we did. So he said, hi, he's from the Yes fan magazine. Just wants to look around. Maybe I didn't go for a Vangelis chat because that probably would never have happened. So we had some pleasantries. Hello, how you doing? How's things? All that, maybe want to drink a water and have a look around. And yeah, sure, fine. I think there's some music going on in the gently in the background. And there was a couple of other people, probably as engineer in there. So I was just standing around looking, and then Vangelis got up, come over, joined Jon, said hi, just hang on there, and went off, and he had a chat. And Jon said, take a look, have a look around, and yeah, chill out, have a look around. So they went off, had a little chat, and I was in the studio with all this stuff, and dream world, really.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So it was a nice little happening. It's not there, and all of it's gone now, and it's not there. But yeah, big man, big personality, beautiful place, and that is the classic years from, that time.
Yeah.
The classic 70s keyboard sounds that you know so well, because it changed. Absolutely. It changed. So he did a decade in there.
Oh wow, that long.
Yeah, he did about that in there. Yeah, all funded by him, and not too many, big hits if you think of that until he gets to that major one. There are not that many hits.
Right.
But yeah, so that was a lovely little moment in time.
Interesting. Do you have other memorabilia that you'd like to share with us?
Well, yeah. I'm not sure how good it looks on here, but
it looks
I
great.
can show you some bits and pieces.
Yeah.
Is this a tour program or?
No, I've got hundreds of cuttings. Hundreds.
Oh, okay.
Hundreds, and these are all of the time and date.
From the newspapers and magazines.
Yeah, I've got tons of it. And there's the Chariots of Fire,
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
which
nice.
obviously came along. We got all the original adverts from the music papers, which are in big folders. All the albums. This is an interesting one, slightly embarrassing, but you'll like this, guys. So back in the 1980, which is what we're talking about. So this was in a local paper. Let's have a look. Let's see.
There it
see
is.
that?
Yeah.
So it's
Is that you?
that's me and about 19. But look in the corner. So that's shop. That's the shop display
Yeah.
that I had.
Oh.
And
Nice.
and I have about 90% of that still, and it's still on the wall.
Wow.
And that's 1980.
Seems like forever ago in some ways, and in other ways, doesn't seem that long ago.
Well, it is strange. I know. It is. That's a bit odd, that, isn't it? Ain't it? You think, ooh, and then you go, yeah, I just remember all of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
is this-
Song sheet.
Yeah, it says "I Hear You Now." Yeah, like the song.
So that's the song sheet.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't play it, but I know someone who can.
It's great just to have, though.
So all these things go back a good while. I did see him in concert, as you know.
Yeah.
Which we can speak about in whatever time you want, and I've got some memorabilia for that as well.
What year was that you saw them, Dave?
1980.
Oh, so it was that same year.
So yeah, a lot happened in that. So yeah, this is from that date in London.
Nice.
Oh, there's a little program I've had since then.
That's cool.
Yeah, was this at the Royal Albert Hall or?
Royal Festival Hall. It's across the river on the Thames.
Okay, I was close.
Yeah. He did so few concerts, which is a shame for the world, really. But he wasn't interested in that side of the business. He just wanted to write music and play it, and wasn't interested. But he would have to have done some, because they needed the income, don't they, to pay for the keyboards so he can carry on working. It's all. But he hated that side of it. He was no interested at all. But thankfully, he did.
Yeah, like reading up on some of the stuff he said over the years, it sounded like he was not very interested in being very popular. Like he just cared about the music, really.
Yeah, he didn't want to be popular at all, did he? And forced into pop stardom on top of the pops of all things. He probably It was the worst night of his life, probably going on top of the pops in England.
Yeah, and I mean, 40 years ago this month, a little film called Blade Runner came out, and the music to that was just fantastic.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah,
the noir aesthetic. It's something that other films I feel have tried to emulate, like that same vibe that the world just doesn't like. The world of that film works better with Vangelis's touch, the score that he added to it.
Absolutely. Here's some words from Jon Anderson recently. Very sad to hear about the passing of the great Vangelis. He was my musical mentor, a good friend. We created such wonderful music together. He was very funny to be with. I can imagine, what Jon went through after, hearing that, and then 9 days later, Alan,
Yeah, and Jon also said, of all the songs I sang for Vangelis, this one says so many things about our lives and how we will survive and the light will shine for us all. And the video that he shared on his Facebook page was the YouTube video for One More Time, the Jon and Vangelis song.
Yeah. And then I don't believe you can replace conventional instruments. They give you a vast amount of color, said Vangelis in a 1986 interview with the Los Angeles Times. He says, but synthesizers was a great challenge. The tools you use are not as important as what is in you, what you do. I don't believe you can replace conventional instruments. They go, it's the same paragraph twice. He must have had a paragraph length stutter.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, imagine that. That's a tough one for Jon, isn't it? Two really great, long-term, 40-year friends
in such a short period of time.
Yeah. It's a tough one, and it's very sad. I found it really quite sad since his passing, because I've played these albums. I've got a whole bunch of them from 40 years ago here. I don't know how many you've heard. But every one of them, like the first 10 albums, are all just great, just wonderful. Either extremely relaxing or frenetic and like bouncing off the wall.
Yeah, like thunder.
Or like you think the whole world's being played in your front room. Like every orchestra's it. It's like, but it takes you away. And I got into this when I was a young lad in a mill town up in the north of England. Not a probably great outlook on going on, but putting Vangelis on, you were right where you just said with the Blade Runner. You were off in this world.
Yeah.
You were off in it. It didn't matter what was going on. You could put that on and you were away. And a recommended one, because it's not usually on the list, is this Apocalypse the Animal. This is the one that was used on the 76 Yes tour.
Okay.
So, with the first track and Creation de Mondo, which is the beautiful one that you get with all the stars and the universes. And this is such a relaxing album. That's a great, you know this one, obviously.
Yeah, Heaven and Hell.
Because it has the most beautiful song in the world on it. With Jon and the start of it. Then it goes slightly sort of bouncing around and manic. You know this one, presumably. Yeah.
What's the title of that one?
It's a Spiral.
Okay.
Spiral. If you love, the 70s keyboard sounds, then, it's full of it. Another favorite of mine is Albeit on 0.39. I don't know if you know that one, but all of these, you will not be disappointed. You will. These are my albums for 40 years. Another one which doesn't get really written about, but again, all 70s. Ignacio.
He put out such a body of work that decade. Wow.
My favorite, actually, the one that gets played probably every month for 40 years is China. Is China, because China is it's just wonderful. You put that on some good headphones, you're walking up the mountains and it's windy and you're there.
Neat.
So it's beautiful. The least I play, ironically, is Chariots of Fire. The least. And another beautiful one.
That's just cheesy commercial one, that's why.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, Opera Sauvage.
Oh, I don't
Beautiful
remember that
album.
one.
Opera Sauvage, beautiful. Really magnificent themes and grandeur, and then quiet, and they're all just lovely albums. He went in a slightly different direction, of course, with Jon and Vangelis. I actually loved it, and I think the first three are, immense. There's favourites on all of them. Private Collection. There's half an hour of pure magnificence with He Is Sailing on a Horizon. It's astounding music.
Did he do work pretty much up until the end? I'm not aware.
I think he did.
Yeah, he had an album that came out last year called Juno to Jupiter. I was listening to it earlier, and it still has that very spacey feel, and it's very operatic. So yeah, he still had it in him, very recently.
It's COVID. He died of COVID related, I believe.
Yeah.
Would you?
Yeah, he was getting. Yeah, there were reports saying that he died while getting treatment for COVID. Yeah.
Would you agree that there's elements of his music from the 70s and maybe even beyond that have elements of what is now coined as New Age? Like, was he doing parts of New Age before there was New Age? Some of that ethereal and ambient music during the calm, sections.
Yeah, I'm trying to think who else did it in the 70s. Would Tangerine Dream be classed as that?
Right.
Maybe.
Or Clive Schultz, kind of, bringing in that. Yeah, I actually think he's a bit beyond. He's got his soul grandeur.
Yeah,
it's so fulfilling, and you've got everything in there. But of course, some of these are really, really quiet. You can put that in the background, just get on with your life. But it's just this little calming. Yeah, they don't all have to be crazy.
Right.
It's just lovely. I've been playing all these albums all week, going back to them for. Yeah, I'm up to speed with quite a lot, but he's done 50 or 100 albums or something. But of course, one of the key things is that he always wanted to keep up with technology and studio and keyboards. And of course, the great years are the analog decade and then he moved away from that. But there is certain sounds on these which are, and they're produced beautifully, by the way. There's no muddy sound there's no one getting involved doing a sort of it's just clear. It's just clear. And of course his setup is fantastic for that, isn't it? It's all direct from into the recording studio and in, and there's not too many blockages, is there? And it's direct straight in, and it's as clear as comes. So I'm a big fan of the first decade, but I think most albums are lovely. The first one, the strange one Steven spoke about, that's just off the wall, that one. But and then there was one called Sex Power or something. He did one for a porn movie, and there's all sorts of strange things he did very early on.
But man's got to pay the bills. Wow. Steve, anything else?
Well, one thing I want to bring up was that I remember in an interview, Jon said about working with Vangelis, it was different from working with Yes, because with Vangelis, they would get something done in one take, or they'd get, I might be paraphrasing, but 3 songs done within a day, whereas with Yes, it would take hours to get stuff done. And that just shows how efficient Vangelis was. I don't know. He's just put out
funny,
like so
'cause-
much. It's
Yeah, I remember Bill Bruford saying that they would deliberate over an hour whether or not a note should be a B or B flat. You know, I can only imagine. That process would kill me. That process would kill me. It would ruin the whole creative process and just getting into the math of it. And, you know, so I'm sure that was like a real awakening for Jon.
They called it spont music, didn't they? Spontaneity music, on the spot. For your American ones, actually, this is interesting. So this is a Vangelis program from a Vangelis show in America.
Oh, Roy Starr.
So, yeah.
Nice.
So quite rare. And that's at the UCLA.
Yeah.
November the 7th in 86.
Wow.
So that's, you know, he did play over there, but certainly not many.
Right.
And are you aware of the track called Mayflower?
yeah, I've listened to it.
Me, not
Yeah.
by name. I don't know if I'd recognize if I heard it.
So I'll just, in 1982, I listened to that and it inspired me that much that I painted this.
Oh, wow. How nice.
Yeah, it's a nice illustration
That's
of Jon and
great.
Vangelis.
Yeah.
So Jon and Vangelis, I created.
It's got the topographic oceans in there, right?
The Galleon,
Yeah,
the
so-
space shuttle,
the Mayflower trip between the
pyramid
So-
from Tails, John's
Yeah.
symbol. That's great.
So I was that inspired in 82 to, I think it was it's ironic, in 82 I left up north in England and left like in May, and I came down for the rest of my life down in southern England. So it was a big leaving moment,
Yeah, interesting.
all due to Jon and Vangelis.
Here's another rest of a quote from that 1986 interview in the LA Times with Vangelis. He says, in film, no single person or point of view dominates. Film is a collective. Artists have to live side by side. That doesn't prevent him from feeling, however, that half of the films I see don't need music. It sounds like something stuffed in. Nobody wants to take a risk. To me, the repetition of previous successes is very tiring. I like that a lot. He was always reinventing and exploring and expanding and going in different directions. As you pointed out, you know, with your comments about just all the wide array of musical environments and moods that he would create, which is really neat. It's very cool. Dave, thanks so much for not only coming on the show, but, you know, sharing some intimate information with your time with them and just your knowledge of Vangelis and his music has really added so much value to this. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been a lovely chance to speak about it. It's been very sad, and thanks for giving me the chance. Yeah,
absolutely. Steve, you want to kind of do a precursor promo for our next episode?
Yeah. So our next episode, which will be broadcast Tuesday, June 7th at 11 a.m. Pacific US, which is 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK time. It'll be an interview with Clive Bailey and Max Hunt, who have put out a new album titled One More Moment under the band name Affirm. So that should be interesting.
And Steve, relate to everybody what that Yes connection is. Why are we doing that on Yesshift?
Right. So Clive Bailey is in Mabel Greer's Toy Shop, you know, pre-Yes band, and that band became active again in recent years. That must be like a world record or something.
A gap.
Yeah.
A respite for 50 years or something.
Yeah, and Max Hunt is from a Yes tribute band called Fragile. So there's a couple Yes connections there, but the music is like very much its own identity. So yeah, it'll be great talking about all that.
Absolutely.
Actually, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Interrupt.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Dave.
okay. Okay, two things there. Is once Jon Anderson backstage at London gig introduced Clive to the other band and Steve Howe because he came in and he let them in and he introduced him as Yess's first guitarist. To everybody in the room's shock and puzzlement until the penny dropped.
We'll have to ask about that.
The other thing is. I got Max the gig with Mabel Grier's Tour Shop.
Oh wow!
Oh, really?
I got him the gig. Yeah.
Wow, that worked out.
Yeah.
I recommended it for him.
That's great. Awesome. Well, tune in for that, everybody, and thanks for following what we do. If you're not familiar with this is episode 46, not counting our many news desk reports. So here's how you can dig in and watch or listen to some archives. You can listen to them on our Anchor channel at anchor.fm/Yesshift. You can see us with guests and on our own, Steven and I, at facebook.com/Yesshift. And if you have comments, suggestions, ideas for shows, we're very open to that. This is your show too. You can write us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. The dot is lowercase. Very important to remember that.
Of course.
We'd love to hear from you and share this with friends that are fellow Yes fans or prog heads. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks so much, everybody. Here's a little Jon and Vangelis on our way out. Live in Los Angeles many, many years back.
So long ago, so clear.
Thanks, everyone.